In September of 2021, I had posted on a Facebook support group for volunteers to take part of a case study, and the thread blew up with responses. In this documentary, I examined about 10 different women on the autism spectrum. Some women I actually spoke to, and some wrote in their responses. I chose to include all of their stories instead of limiting to just a handful because I wanted to show how complex the spectrum really is. As you will see, there are some women that share experiences of trauma, bullying, and certain characteristics of autism. I will share my own experiences dealing with autism as well. And for the first question, I kind of screwed up on as I forgot to ask the first handful of participants this question, and that question is, what is your occupation? Because of my error, I will read off what these women listed in their Facebook profiles. Mindy's a grad student, Tosha is a writer, Sarah R. works in an emergency room, and I'm an undergrad pursuing a psychology major and a communications minor.
I am a casual staff, family and child support company.
I'm currently unemployed. I'm a student right now.
What kind of student?
Art student.
I am a paraprofessional, and I work with students who have been diagnosed with autism.
So technically at the moment, my title would be data manager, but I've been trained as like an epidemiologist. So I've kind of had a bunch of different jobs in public health, healthcare, adjacent fields.
Oh, I'm a childcare provider out of my home.
I am a project manager for a real estate development group.
I am currently a full-time student and a volunteer EMT, if that counts.
What kind of student?
I am currently studying biology and planning to go to vet school.
Oh, that's a hard one, actually. I never know how to answer it because I studied anthropology at university. I consider myself to be an anthropologist. I'm trying to get into a graduate program here. I live in Panama. But I own a language school, so I teach English. So I'm a teacher, I guess.
And before autism, were you ever misdiagnosed with anything? Most cases, women are misdiagnosed of borderline personality, bipolar, or schizophrenia. I was not misdiagnosed with anything. My therapist caught it early. She knew the signs and symptoms and could easily identify that I had autism. However, the other women I talked to had been misdiagnosed with other disorders, specifically mental disorders, or had been diagnosed later in life. And some of these women couldn't afford an autism diagnosis and are self-diagnosed.
Yes, I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, and binge eating disorder.
No, I wouldn't say misdiagnosed. I did actually get an ADHD diagnosis, and that I actually was diagnosed with that before autism even came on my radar as something I might have. But I don't think that was a misdiagnosis. Like I think I have both.
Right. So originally I was told that I had bipolar depression, which then another doctor ended up changing to saying that I had bipolar 2 and that I was just in the depression, phase of that. And then after that, it changed to persistent major depression. And then the borderline personality disorder diagnosis kind of really changed things a lot. So.
I had 17 diagnoses before I got diagnosed with.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What kind of disorders?
Your classics: ADHD, severe depression, severe anxiety, severe OCD, PTSD, CPSD, the child version of that as well. And then there was more sensory processing disorder, auditory processing disorder, which annoyed me that they never put all of them together. And then bipolar disorder, and there were a couple others.
Yeah, actually. So I was told I had, they couldn't really decide. Major depression disorder with anxiety disorder. I always thought I was bipolar. And then I fought really hard to get a bipolar diagnosis, and that never happened. But then as I got older, I realized that I might have had like maybe a learning disability. But I always just had questions. And I'm going to be honest, I have not been diagnosed with autism. I'm self-diagnosed right now.
Just depression and anxiety. I did have one therapist suggest bipolar, but it didn't make sense with what I was experiencing at all. And so I stopped seeing them kind of immediately and lost a lot of faith in them after that.
When I went through, we had to do evaluations because of my ex-husband's false accusations. And I was misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I saw an actual psychiatrist and another psychologist for a second opinion at the recommendation of my therapist. And the psychiatrist said that I had complex PTSD, not borderline personality disorder like she had said.
I wasn't diagnosed before.
So they originally told me that I had borderline personality disorder, and then ADHD, anxiety, and depression.
Depression and bipolar 2 with hypomania.
No, my previous psychologist diagnosed me as GAD and agoraphobic and anxiety attacks. All of those are true. I just mask very well.
And do you think your agoraphobia might be linked to your autism, like sensory issues-wise?
It very well might be. I really think that everything is connected.
And did you take any medication for said diagnosis?
The medications that I was on they were for symptoms that I was previously having. So there wasn't really much of a change other than it opened some doors for classes, like my schooling and the way that I test, and then getting into some therapy.
Sure, yeah. So I did take medication. Most notably, I guess, for the misdiagnosis part, was that I was on lithium for a period of time.
Oh boy.
But I've also taken like a bunch of other antidepressants over the course of this. I mean, the list of medications I've been on is extremely long, and none of them really have ever been effective. But anyway, I was also told to resign from school to go into treatment full time, and I was in college, and that was a big change, but a necessary one.
I've been on a lot of medication until I got out of high school, when I could choose not to be on medicine. I haven't been on medicine since high school, but I was on Lexapro, Zoloft. I was on a whole bunch, and then I don't even know half of them because I ended up in a mental hospital at one point, and I was on a whole bunch of medicine during that time.
I did, a couple times. I never really stuck with it because it didn't help my symptoms and made it worse. So I did start and stop a few times of antidepressants.
Yes, I did.
And how else was it treated?
I was in the therapy called CBT.
Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, and then I was in a few different inpatient cares.
We tried a couple. We tried Zoloft. The Zoloft was a long time ago. And another one that I can't remember. And I'm currently on Wellbutrin, which helps with the anxiety.
And what symptoms of said diagnosis were you experiencing?
So at the period of time that I first got help, I was definitely chronically suicidal, but what led to that was kind of this constant, persistent depression that resulted from feeling like an outsider my entire life, and completely misunderstood, and I wasn't very well able to express myself, and had a lot of sensory issues that were not identified as sensory issues. So I was I moved away from college and was having a lot of trouble kind of adapting without the support network that I was very comfortable in. So that's kind of what threw everything off and into, motion.
Mostly the insomnia, and I have ADHD also, so that was presenting to them, or originally thinking that it was mania as part of bipolar, but then it didn't really fit because I didn't have the drop, the depression part, so it just didn't fit. Like, my mania was constant. It wasn't really an up and down.
Okay, so like you were manic all the time without the depressive symptoms?
Yeah, so they took it as mania, but I was later diagnosed with ADHD and autism, so that was where the supposed mania came from.
The psychologist involved, she said that I was caustic and flat, and she said I lacked empathy and emotional regulation, and she said I elevated in a lot of things that she said a lot of really, really bad things in her report.
So I was having really bad rage, outbursts, for no reason at all, purposely being mean to people just because it was easier to not care than take on that extra emotional load. I was I don't think spontaneous is the word, but that's pretty much the only word that I can think of. Just really the anger. And, they say that you have a favorite person with borderline, but I never really did. So that was kind of why I didn't think it was BPD anyway.
Definitely the intense emotional regulation part. Struggling with a sense of self, self-harming behaviors, lack of impulse control, unstable relationships that didn't last very long.
I had very sudden mood changes. I could be very happy one minute and then my mom could say something and it would just set me off edge. But in reality, I was on edge all day. My masking was just, I'm happy. And that one thing my mom said to me was just enough to send me over the edge.
Severe fatigue, sort of a brain fog, inability to concentrate and focus.
Okay, and did you have any developmental delays growing up? So, from what my mom told me, I wasn't walking until about 23 months, and I think the typical child develops walking skills at 18 months, the very latest. I wasn't potty trained until the age of 4, and the typical child develops potty training skills at around 2 to 3 years of age. I also wasn't reading at the typical pace that a child would. I did not learn how to read until 4th grade, but I did not develop reading comprehension skills until 9th grade. And I had and still have the hardest time with fine motor skills, and I think that has to do with my eye condition.
Not that I'm aware of, just kind of socially. I was pretty academically successful. I always rated about slightly above average in everything, the SATs, the LSAT, ACT. I always had straight A's. I was pretty good with tasks that I could do independently.
I didn't talk until I was 2. I walked very early. I walked at 8 months. I was just weird. I guess you could say, how my mom describes it is I would never want to play with kids. I would just be by myself and play, but she thought that was just because there was no siblings that were close to age to me to play with. But I don't think that's the case. I just didn't want to play with anyone.
Yeah, emotionally. I didn't toe walk or anything like that, but I did. I I had, well, they call it an advanced like development or something for emotions. So I never like cried when I was younger. Like, well, like if something died, I just said, okay, whatever. Like, it wasn't anything crazy. And then I think I talked early. I wasn't late, but I think those are the only two that I can remember.
I don't know. So I don't know if you're familiar with Latino culture, but they love talking about you, like, to your face. So, like, they'll tell you everything you did wrong when you were, like, 5 years old. Like, fuck you. And so, my mother, now I've always wondered about these things that I was told growing up, and now I'm looking back at them again, and I'm wondering, is this a sign of autism? Like, when I was little, I couldn't see straight, but the doctors told my mom it would just like figure itself out, and I figured it out. I can see. I used to. My mom said that I used to like not let anybody hold me, and I used to just cry, and I used to get annoyed by this story because they used to make fun of me, like I'm always crying, and so like apparently I used to cry all the time, and when people tried to like touch me or hold me, and especially strangers, like, or just like family that was new that I didn't understand, and I didn't learn how to read until the 5th grade. I got held back in the 5th grade, but I honestly, when I'm looking back at it, Kayla, I think I knew how to read because I got that far, right? I just think that I didn't understand the way they were teaching me. And it just, things didn't click. Things need to be explained to me differently, and that's really the only delay I can think of, because again, I grew up in a poor neighborhood. I went to an inner city school. All of my teachers were mean, okay? And I always thought that my deficits in school were because my 1st grade teacher yelled at me when I got a 3-letter word wrong, because I didn't even know we were supposed to be practicing at home. Like, I didn't know any of these things. My parents didn't help me. So I always thought that these were just because I had shitty parents. I didn't know that there was something like different about me. So, my teachers all yelled at me. My parents are immigrants. Inner city school, they were all white teachers, all black kids who were all immigrants. They were all Haitians. And so when you have a teacher and 35 students, a lot of these teachers were racist, and looking back. And so I always just thought that my problems in school had to do with racism and had to do with my parents' shitty parenting and my teachers' shitty teaching. I didn't know that it was partially me too.
I'm trying to remember, actually. For some reason, I want to say that, like, I, like, almost kind of, I think I was one of those babies that, like, I was trying to, like, walk before I crawled or something. Yeah, I don't really know that much about when I was a baby, so maybe I should find out more about that.
So I did not walk on time as far as I know, but I do not know the timeline off the top of my head. But otherwise, no, I was accelerated as far as language.
I did go to speech. I thought it was my hearing, but who knows? I had a hard time saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I learned certain things in speech. I went all through elementary. Because I missed so much school, they put me in a resource for kids who are behind, and I finished 2.5 books in 2 months. Those books, normal kids would take 2.5 years. Then I also went to an outside tutoring place because my older sister had problems. I was 2-3 grades ahead in every subject. I guess I wasn't behind.
Mostly with talking. If I was like, it was the worst if I was like sick. I wouldn't really know how to like communicate it to my mom until like I was at the point of like actually like throwing up or something, and she'd be like, well, why didn't you tell me? And I just would feel like I couldn't talk and like I don't know, it was weird. It was just like, I don't know if I just believed that if I didn't say anything, it would just go away. If, like, talking about it was going to make it actually real. But I just, like, it was more with, like, speech as a kid.
I don't believe so. I think I was actually very early on most benchmarks. Like, I learned to walk when I was 8 months old. I was reading at like a 5th grade level by the time I got into kindergarten. I have a brother who's 2 years older than me, and so it was always just kind of chalked up to I had to do everything my brother did, and so I was basically 2 years early on most things.
Walking. It took me a while to walk, and then I had problems with my legs, like we know now that that's what it was, but back in the 70s, they were like, oh, well, there must be something wrong with her legs. She's going to need leg braces and blah, blah, blah. But it really was just like whatever mobility problems that we have, because one of the kids also had it, and that was one of the signs. And it was the same way, like my mom was like, oh, she walks just like you did when you were little.
The only developmental delay I had is I skipped crawling.
So you went straight to walking?
Yes.
Oh, cool. So what was your childhood like? My childhood was traumatic because of my comorbidity of having one eye and going through a bunch of surgeries before I can even talk. These surgeries had no anesthesia, and they would be flukes because the eyepiece just kept falling out. And there was a lot of arguments in my family about whether or not I should get a prosthetic eye. My dad's side really wanted me to get an eye, and my mom's side said, no, it's fine. She's perfect the way she is. Socially, I was inept because I could not tell if people were making fun of me. I thought I was very popular in school, but the reality was people were making fun of me and pretended to like me. When it comes to schooling, I went to special ed, but, like, only in certain classes. Like, I was good at creative writing and art, so for my math and sciences, I was put into a special needs program, and we'd work on that.
For the most part, it was a pretty decent childhood. My parents were very loving towards me. I was bullied in my school years by my peers. I had a lot of, like, negative experiences from my childhood therapists and the professionals that I was with.
Like, were they just judgmental, or, like, what were they like?
They were super judgmental, super invalidating. A lot of times they would blame what I'm doing on me, and they would say that I'm causing all these problems for myself, or I'm just doing it for attention, and there wasn't really a problem with me.
My childhood was a little odd. My mom and dad divorced when I was really young. My mom was mentally ill. She was schizophrenic. She had mild retardation, and she had bipolar disorder. And she would, we ended up being taken from her. We were placed with my grandma initially, and then we were placed, me and my brother, with my dad. And my dad, he didn't have any difficulties or anything, but he had 5 kids. But his was a very happy, stable household. My childhood was pretty happy for the most part. Some of the difficulties that I had that I later found were, some autistic symptoms. My parents really didn't think anything of it, and I was so high functioning, it really went undiagnosed until I was an adult. People would just chalk it up to being sensitive or triggered easily, or like some of my sensory issues and stuff, they just call it like sensitive, awkward, shy, reclusive, not very social.
And what?
But nothing,
Oh, sorry.
nothing debilitating. So nothing. My parents didn't. They had a lot of kids. Like, it just kind of went unnoticed, I guess.
Shitty. I can't say that fully. I grew up in a pretty wealthy family. Parents stayed together, went to Disney like 10 times. Like, it was like honestly a really fine childhood. But when I was in elementary, I had like a bunch of discipline like actions. Like, I talked at a turn constantly. I didn't understand boundaries. I became friends with teachers. Like, that was like, I didn't really have friends. It was just more over like teachers. I stole things, but like things that are dumb. Like, I would put pairs of scissors in my backpack. I was never violent. I just wanted the scissors, I guess. There was a few little pieces of clay, like art pieces, that our art teacher was using for a mural that I took. Just stuff like that. And then whenever I became a little bit older, it started to become hard for me to be in, social situations, being around guys, being like social constructs, facial emotions, like it's just that kind of thing. And then, that was mostly childhood.
I see. So why was your childhood so shitty though?
I always felt like I was disappointing somebody. I had like my social, or how do I say? So my testing scores were always really good, but I was failing all my classes because I wouldn't turn in my work. Like, it wasn't like I would just not turn things in because I didn't feel like I had done it enough times. So I would keep doing it over and over. And I would have worksheets from class. So it would have like a line of 10 of the same answers because I would keep doing them over and over. So I never turned them in. And, my parents were always very upset. They were just, it just felt disappointing. And so I never really had friends growing up. And if I did, it was somebody that my sister was friends with. And so I never really felt like I fit in because all of my things that I wanted to do are not what other people wanted to do. I was very structured, and I wanted things to be one way. And, as kids, that's not what, other kids want.
It was really difficult. Both of my parents were drug addicts. They divorced when I was 9 years old. My mother was really abusive physically and psychologically. She was very neglectful. And even though she got clean when I was 10, she's still crazy. And so it was never really good. Household, and she kicked me out when I was 17.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I turned out okay.
Traumatic and extremely poor.
Can you elaborate on that?
The greatest hits would be a couple of molestations by family, extreme poverty, bullying, mental abuse from a step-parent.
That sounds really difficult. Oh, continue.
In childhood, my brother died when I was also 16. That's probably around the time that I went to the psychiatrist the first time too. So yeah, all that was childhood.
I had not a normal childhood. I was always cast as the weird child in my family. I never made friends. I was the youngest, and there's a 9-year difference between me and the closest to age. And that one that's closer to age, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when she was 10. And living with her was very rough. Me and her fought all the time. and that's where they thought my childhood PTSD stemmed from. But in reality, it was just bipolar, or not bipolar, sorry, autism.
So I've always been like an obsessive perfectionist, and like top of my class, literally like graduated elementary school as like valedictorian, but never really like ever asked for support. So it was very independent, but very high, like high achieving and like nerdy, but I was extremely shy, and had a lot of like pain and like other health issues that were not really taken as seriously as they probably should have, and felt a lot of neglect that I think is more down to an understanding, or like a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding. But so it was characterized by a lot of like ignored or like internal struggle that kind of didn't present itself until I was a little bit older, when it came out into depression when I was like a teenager.
My childhood was good. I lived with my mom and the 5 kids and my grandparents. I was sick all the time, so I had one-on-one time with my grandpa, who was a retired school teacher. I just couldn't get enough information. I love learning. My older sister was the leader of the pack, so I just followed her and took cues from her on how to be normal. Anytime I got out of the line, she told me. She's so funny and cool. I am serious and nerdy. Now, I know that she is a narcissist, but back then I never questioned her. I played the piano for hours at a time, so that helped me a lot too. My mom is a perfectionist, so that took me a very long time to be okay with being me. I always knew I was different. My mom always told me I was special and straight from heaven because I was so sensitive. As it turns out, being sick all the time helped me have one-on-one time with my grandpa, away from the school where it was too much most days.
Childhood, I was like, I was like super bookworm. I was kind of overachiever at school. So I would I would read like a million books all the time. I had like different, like I was always a big reader. I liked to, I don't know. I feel like whenever I went anywhere, like I just always felt more comfortable if I had a book. But I also definitely don't feel like I was very, like I had a couple of core friends, and I remember more or less feeling pretty happy in elementary school and stuff. But I do remember I didn't really connect very well with a lot of my classmates. Like I definitely early on had the sense of that I was like, I was the girl that was smart and nice, but also kind of shy and different. And,
I was homeschooled, and I kept to myself a lot, and it was mostly just me and my brother. My dad passed away when I was 13, so my mom had to just be the one to take care of us after that.
What was schooling like for you?
I had a lot of hard time with math. I really, really did well with writing and English and everything, but math, I've always had problems with grasping, fractions and stuff like that, and history. It's I would read blocks of text, and it's as if I read nothing. I would just keep trying to read it over and over again and just not retain any of it.
Not great. It was very chaotic. I had very, very strict parents who were not the most supportive people, who were very emotionally volatile. So there was a lot of, me having to take care of their emotional needs, a lot of parentification, a lot of unintentional emotional abuse.